that after this evening, we shan't be doing Elijah any longer. I also regret to inform you that we have to squelch about 3 things into one to get it done. So, buckle up, baby. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Let us go to 1 Kings chapter 21. 1 Kings 21. I also regret to inform you that after tonight there will be no more Christmas decor. Tomorrow's Monday.
So after tonight?
Yes, after tonight there will be no more decor.
Coming down tonight?
Yes. So, all right. 1 Kings 21. 1 King 21. Now, we mentioned last week there was a message that was preached by a guy named R.G. Lee called Payday Someday. You should write that down. It's worth a listen to. I mean, it's kind of old school. He's deep south. But if you Google it, you'll find it. And incredible, incredible message. It's one of those, few that you would say, wow, that was something else. I mean, when a guy gets invited out 1,500 times to preach the exact same message, that's a message. And so I would encourage you, Payday Someday, to listen to that. That comes actually out of this text, 1 Kings chapter 21. So I won't belabor it. I will assign that for homework. How's that sound? Church homework, it shouldn't be, but it does. So I could never do it justice like he did, so I'll just leave it to you. But in 1 Kings chapter 21, basically the story up to this point is the king, whose name is Ahab, who has been Elijah's arch nemesis to this point. Ahab decides that there's this vineyard right outside of out of his palace that he wants. Unfortunately, it's owned by somebody else, but he's king, and so he murders the dude and steals the vineyard. This sets really well with God, as you might imagine, that the king of Israel, the representative of God on earth, murders and steals for gain. And so he sends Elijah to talk to Ahab. And so we're going to pick up there in verse 20 of 1 Kings 21. So Ahab said to Elijah, "Have you found me, O my enemy?" And he answered, "I have found you, because you have sold yourself to do evil in the sight of the Lord. Behold, I will bring calamity on you. I will take away your posterity, and will cut off from Ahab every male in Israel, both bond and free. I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah, because the provocation which you have provoked me to anger made Israel to sin. And concerning Jezebel, the Lord also spoke, saying, The dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. The dogs shall eat whoever belongs to Ahab and dies in the city, and the birds of the air shall eat whoever dies in the field." Very kind of graphic prophecy that you are now dog food, dude. And that's kind of like the shorthand. But he says, look, I'm going to cut off Ahab, I'm going to cut off your line, I'm going to kill your wife, and you're all going to get eaten by animals. It's going to be awesome. Congratulations, O king. This is your reward. And so he ends up with this prophecy about Ahab. And then we skip forward to 1 Kings chapter 22. So we go forward to 22. And there comes a time where Israel and Judah, the two nations, decide to kind of pool their resources, and they go to war. And they go out there to war, and the battle's not going badly. The enemy knows that they just need to kill the kings, and the people will scatter. And so they adopt a policy of kill the kings, let everybody else live, which is kind of cool if you're a common foot soldier in the army, that they're just really gunning for royalty. And so they go off on this. And Ahab decides that, meantime, that he's going to ride off into battle. And so he dresses up just like a common soldier, which, given the enemy's strategy, not such a bad thing. And so they dress up a decoy, and they figure out, they chase the decoy down, they figure out it's a decoy. And so they go hunting for Ahab. Verse 34, this is the coolest thing in the world. 1 Kings 22:34. Now a certain man drew a bow at random. So the dude's just like, right? And struck the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. So he said to the driver of his chariot, "Turn around and take me out of the battle, for I am wounded." And so literally a guy who just shooting. So here's the reason why we don't just randomly shoot arrows, right? If you have a bow and you have an arrow, don't randomly shoot stuff. You never know who you might kill. This dude just literally let one fly, and killed the king of Israel. Not too shabby. So verse 40, Ahab rested with his father. Then Ahaziah, his son, reigned in his place. So Ahab dies in battle as they're rinsing out his chariot. Guess who's drinking the blood coming out of the chariot? The dogs. And so that prophecy came to fulfillment. Ahaziah, his son, reigns in his stead for about 2 years. Now, Ahaziah was just as bad as his old man. He was worse. And he reigned for 2 years, and he walked after the ways of his father, and he did all the things his dad did, and God said, done with you. And so we get to 2 Kings chapter 1. And this is the coolest thing. 2 Kings chapter 1, Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. So there's this area called Moab that Israel had conquered. The Moabites decide they've had enough of this, and they're out of there. So verse 2, now Ahaziah fell through the lattice of his upper room in Samaria and was injured. So why he was walking on the lattice or climbing up the lattice, I don't know. But lattice work is not the most substantial woodwork on the planet. And so he's walking on the lattice work, he falls through, and so he sends messengers, and he says to them, go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover from this injury. So who's Beelzebub? Who knows, who cares? He's the god of Ekron. Is he the god of gods? No. Problem if you're a Jewish king sending a messenger to a god of another country who's not God and barely a country? Yeah, problem. Verse 3, but the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, our hero, the son of Tishbite, arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king in Samaria, and say to them, is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore, says the Lord, you shall not come down from the bed to which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. So Elijah departed. He is always this guy with great news, isn't he? And so the messengers are like, okay. And they walk back. And they get to the king, and the king's like, what are you doing back so early? And they're like, we met this dude, and he said you're dead. And the king's like, what did the guy look like? He's like, he was a hairy guy, and he had a belt on. He goes, oh, Elijah. Seriously, that's actually how this conversation went. And so the king decides that he's going to have Elijah arrested. He's like, go get him. And so he sends a captain and 50 men to Elijah, and they're like, hail, man of God, come out and let's go to the king. And Elijah's like, well, if I am a man of God, then let fire come down and consume you. And he must have been, because it did. 51 dudes, toast. And the king, literally, yeah. And so the king got frustrated, so he sent another captain and another 50 guys. And the soldiers come up to Elijah's house and they said, hail, man of God, come with us, you're going to go see the king. And Elijah said, if I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you. And he must have been, because it did again. And the king was not happy, but he sends out another captain and another 50. You'd think like this whole army is expendable. And this guy, rather than yelling at Elijah, comes kneeling and crawling up to the door. He says, man of God, please have mercy on me and my guys. I don't want to be here, but I work for the king. Please have mercy on us and just come, please. And the Spirit of the Lord said to Elijah, go ahead and go. And so Elijah doesn't call fire down from heaven, which is nice. And he goes with the guys, and he gets to the king. And guess what he tells the king? Yeah. Verse 16. Yeah, no, you're toast. No, he didn't need to tell the king he was toast. He's just going to tell the king that he was going to die. So verse 16, he says to him, thus says the Lord, because you have sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is it because there is no God in Israel to inquire of his word? Was there a God in Israel? Yes. Did the king know him? No, and that was really the problem. And so Elijah says, look, is there not a God here you could talk to? You had to go sending off to some other place to something that wasn't God? I mean, seriously now? And so he says this, therefore you shall not come down from the bed to which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. Elijah was not afraid to deliver this message right in the king's grill. And so he does. So Ahaziah died, according to the word of the Lord, which Elijah had spoken, because he had no son. Jehoram became king in his place. And so the line of Ahab comes to a screeching halt. Ahaziah dies, and suddenly the prophecy is fulfilled. Jezebel's already dead. Everybody that Ahab knew or loved or spawn is dead. And so that seems to be a good thing. And we get into chapter 2, and Elijah now prepares to leave the scene. He's at the end of his life. He's certainly at the end of his ministry. His nemesis Ahab is gone. His nemesis children are gone. He's outlived all of God's enemies. Not that God ever has a shortage of enemies, but he's outlived the ones that he was supposed to work on. And so Elijah prepares to depart. And it came to pass in 1 Kings 2:2, came to pass when the Lord was about to take Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Then Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to Bethel." And so Elijah and Elisha are kind of, working together now. Elisha's getting ready to take over for Elijah, and they're here in Gilgal. And he says, "Look, you stay here in Gilgal. God is sending me on to Bethel." And Elisha says, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The only person on the world who could have worked with Elijah was Elisha, because his head was just as hard. I mean, these two were like rams in a plane, just absolutely beating each other's heads together, bludgeoning. They could go toe to toe. Elisha was the only guy on the planet who could go toe to toe with Elijah. And so Elisha goes, "Stay here." "No, I'm going with you." This is how they conversed, I'm sure. It was like cavemen almost. But they were prophets. And so Elijah goes from Gilgal to Bethel, and he's got Elisha with him. And he gets to Bethel, and he says the same thing again. "Elisha, stay here. God is sending me on to Jericho." And Elisha says, "No, I'm going with you." And so they leave from Bethel, and they go to Jericho. Now, if you were to map this on a map, they're heading from west, heading east. They're to Jericho. And then the same thing happens when they're in Jericho. "Elisha, God is sending me to Jordan. Stay here." Elisha goes, "No, I'm going with you." Figure this out. And so they get up and they go from Jericho over to Jordan. We're all the way to verse 8. I was summing up. And then Elijah asks Elijah, "What do you want?" And let me read this for you. Verse 9 in 2 Kings 2. "And so it was when they had crossed over that Elijah said to Elisha, 'Ask.'" Everything they say has exclamation points. Do you see that? I'm not making this up when I say these guys are just like aggressors. "Ask!" What do you want from me? "What may I do for you before I am taken away from you? Look, I'm leaving. What do you want? Just ask me." And Elisha said, and I doubt he said it calmly, but he might have, I don't know. "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." And so here's Elisha. He's already a battering ram. And here's Elijah, an old battering ram. He says, "What do you want from me?" "I want twice what you have." And he's like, "Son, you can't handle twice." That's almost how this conversation takes place. Look at what he says in verse 10. "You have asked a hard thing." You've asked for something pretty intense. "Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if not, it shall not be." He goes, "Okay, fine. It's yours as long as you see me leave. But if you don't see me leave, nothing." You get this feeling, don't you, as you read through the scriptures? Then it happened, as they continued on and talked, that suddenly, because these things don't come out of just nowhere, suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them. And so you've got some angelic driver on a chariot of fire with two horses of fire, and he comes riding up between these two old goats, ramming heads, and he just drives right through them. He's like, "Boys, break it up." It's not quite that bad. They did like each other, sort of, I think. And so the chariot just, and Elijah's like, "My ride." And he hops. Why would you hop into? I don't know. But a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And so, the angelic driver's like, "Mush!" And they go up and they start. And then Elijah was gone. It's almost anticlimactic. Except for only fitting that Elijah, who called down fire, would go up in a chariot of fire in a circle. For all the world looking like fire being called back up into heaven. And that's pretty much what happened.
Elijah's like the dude of fire.
He was. Now Elijah also had this mantle, this vest, this coat thing that he dropped on the way up, and Elisha caught that thing, and guess what? Elisha picked up right where Elijah left off. And you'll have to read it, but you get into the end of 2 Kings chapter 2 and 3, the body count just keeps going. And it's pretty impressive. I mean, Elijah had already separated the Jordan River to come, and Elisha's on his way back. He's like, all right, God, your turn. And he smacks the water with Elijah's cloak. The water parts, and he just walks through on dry land. I mean, like, why go around when you can go through? And wow. And so Elijah's life comes to an end, and he's one of two people in all of Scripture that do not die. He went through a whirlwind in a chariot of fire. Not a bad way to go. Pretty intense.
Awesome.
He is awesome. Elijah is a very intense and awesome character. I would agree with you on that one. So what's the lesson we learned from the life of Elijah? It's okay to play with fire as long as you can throw down. Josh. He is the prophet of fire. He called fire down. He beheaded a whole bunch of dudes, and then he called fire down, and he called fire down. And when he didn't want to walk around the river, he walked through it. Yeah, faithful people go up. I'll buy that. Anybody else lessons from the life of Elijah? These are good observations. He kind of took yours? Hard times call for hard men. Difficult missions call for tough guys. It's not all pansies in the Bible, is it? All right. Any prayer requests that we need to cover tonight? I'm not going to